You know, everybody dream of winning the lottery someday. You get the mansions, you get the cars, you get to go on vacation whenever, and party all night long. Some say the lottery preys on the poor people, and study shows, according to an article on alternet.org, that non-whites spend much more on lottery than whites, with one study putting the figure at $998 for African Americans and $210 for whites. Households with incomes under $25,000 spent an average of about $600 a year on lottery, while households with income under $100,000 and up spent about $300 a year. People who never graduated from college spent the most, about $700 a year on lottery, while graduates spent under $200. One good thing, though, that most states are now doing is letting winners remain anonymous, which is good because taking that picture with that check smiling can make you a target, bringing jealousy, envy, and hate. Let's start with the story of Craigory Burch Jr. Now, Craigory Burch Jr. was a 20-year-old forklift driver from Fitzgerald, Georgia. In November 2015, Craigory bought a Georgia Fantasy 5 jackpot ticket at a gas station. He ended up winning $434,272 off the ticket, and with his money, he started helping his community, like buying Christmas presents for people in need. Now see, Craigory lived in a high-crime neighborhood though, and everyone knew he won almost $500,000. 2 months after winning the lottery, he started receiving strange calls and text messages saying he needed to be careful because people was out to get him. On January 21st, 2016, while at home with his family, a shotgun blast blew open his front door and 3 masked armed men ran inside his house. Craigory and his girlfriend were sitting on the couch holding their infant babies when the home invasion was happening. Craigory begged the men not to shoot him in front of his girlfriend and kids, even offering money to the men. Fearing for his life, he threw his pants at the robbers, thinking his wallet was in one of the pockets. But when the armed men searched for the wallet, it wasn't there. Now the robbers were furious, and Craigory was first shot in both legs. But after the robbers gave up searching for the debit card, they returned and shot him again, killing him in cold blood. The bank card was in Craigory's pocket. 7 people was charged in connection with the death from misdemeanors and felonies, including malice murder, aggravated assault, armed robbery, and home invasion. He was 20 years old. R.I.P. Craigory Burch Jr. Now this next story is about Jeffrey Dampier, who grew up in Chicago's West Side and worked as a security guard. Now in 1996, Jeffrey and his then wife ended up winning the $20 million jackpot from the Illinois lottery. After winning the lottery, him and his wife divorced. He later went on to marry Crystal Jackson, and Jeffrey and Crystal moved to Tampa, Florida, where he invested his money into a gourmet popcorn store in Tampa. Now see, Crystal had a sister named Victoria, and Jeffrey began to have a sexual relationship with Victoria. He would give her money, buy her presents, and was even paying for her apartment. But on July 26, 2005, Victoria had a boyfriend named Nathaniel Jackson, who was out for greed. Nathaniel told Victoria to call Jeffrey over with plans to kidnap Jeffrey for money. Now see, once Jeffrey arrived, Nathaniel pulled out a shotgun and they tied his hands behind his back with shoelaces, forcing him into a van. Nathaniel repeatedly hit Jeffrey with the butt of the gun, demanding he give up his money, but Jeffrey wouldn't do it. Now, as they drove around with Jeffrey, Nathaniel handed the gun to his girlfriend Victoria and said, "Shoot him or I'll shoot you." Scared for her life, Victoria squeezed the trigger, firing once in the back of Jeffrey's head. He died instantly. After that, they abandoned the van at the end of a dead-end street and fled the scene, but was caught soon after. Now, Victoria Jackson's attorney told the jury that she suffered from battered spouse syndrome and acted as though she had no will of her own. She didn't know the plan that night was to kill Jeffrey. Both suspects, Victoria and Nathaniel, were sentenced to life in prison immediately after the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. He was 39 years old. R.I.P. Jeffrey Dampier. Now, this next story is about Doris Murray, who was a mother of 4 and grandmother of 7, who had won $5 million in the Georgia lottery on her 41st birthday in 2007. But see, Doris didn't take the $5 million in a lump sum. Instead, she opted to collect about $172,000 after taxes every year for 20 years. She was planning to use the money to start a trust fund for her grandchildren. Now see, Doris had a boyfriend named Derek, who she had been dating for some time. Now, after winning the lottery, she wanted to break up with him and just be friends, but Derek didn't want to accept that. Witnesses say that they saw Doris and Derek arguing earlier that day. Doris Murray's family called the police after they saw Derek leaving her home with blood on his face. When the police arrived, Doris was found dead inside her home, stabbed multiple times in the chest. The police spotted Derek driving later that afternoon and tried to pull him over, but he sped off and the police chased him until he crashed. He was taken to the hospital for treatments of his injuries. Now, Doris' daughter said Derek viewed her mom as his ticket for getting out of debt. His house had gone into foreclosure and he was thinking Doris was supposed to be his way out. Derek was later charged for the murder of Doris. The Georgia Lottery spokesperson said that the money will continue to be paid to whoever is in Doris Murray's will. She was 41 years old. R.I.P. Doris Murray. And the last story I want to get into, which y'all probably seen on Oxygen, Snap. Now, this story is about Abraham Shakespeare. Now, see, by the 8th grade, Abraham Shakespeare quit school to work with his father in the fields to make some money. Now see, Abraham was illiterate, and some say he couldn't tell 6,000 from 60,000. He could barely use a cell phone. Now for the most part, he was homeless, even picking up pennies off the ground, but he would pick up odd jobs ever so often to survive. Now see, Greg Smith, who owned a barbershop, would look out for Shakespeare, giving him little jobs to do around the barbershop. One day, Shakespeare pulled up to the barbershop in a brand new BMW and told Greg he just hit the lottery for $30 million, but took a lump sum of $17 million. Now see, Shakespeare was a very kind-hearted guy. After winning the lottery, he paid for other people's funerals and he paid people's rents and bill. Even though he knew people were taking advantage of him, he just couldn't say no to them. He even loaned Greg Smith $63,000 to help with his mother's house. Now, almost a year goes by after winning the lottery, and Shakespeare ends up meeting a woman named Dee Moore, who claims she wants to write a book about him and be his financial advisor to help manage his money. But months into doing business together, Dee and Abraham had an argument over his money and access to his accounts. Feeling that Abraham was going to fire her, Dee brought a gun and started practicing and training at a gun range. And one day, after meeting up with him, she murdered him with a shot to the stomach and a shot to the chest. She then had her ex-husband dig a hole behind the house with a backhoe that she had recently purchased at an auction. She told her ex-husband she needed a hole because she wanted to bury some trash. But what she really did was dump Abraham Shakespeare's body into the hole herself, and then she hired a contractor to cover it up with concrete. Now, as time passes, Abraham's family and friends start to worry about him because they haven't heard from him in a while. Now in control of his finances after only 60 days in killing him, Dee tells his family and friends that Abraham is on vacation living the life, but his family wasn't buying her story and filed a missing persons report to the police. To cover her tracks, Dee asked Abraham's friend Greg Smith to call his family and tell them that he's okay. She paid him $300 to call Abraham Shakespeare's mother and pretend to be Shakespeare. Now see, at the time, Greg Smith didn't think anything was wrong and didn't see any harm with doing that favor for Dee Dee. But see, the cops was watching Dee Dee and they saw her give Greg Smith the $300. Now the cops approached Greg and told him the situation, and he ended up helping the cops set her up. Greg stuck a small recorder inside the Red Bull can and got all the evidence the police needed. And on December 10th, 2012, Dee Dee was found guilty and charged with murder in the first degree and sentenced to life in prison without parole. He was 43 years old. R.I.P. Abraham Shakespeare.